She's an engineer by training and a change agent by passion. She's an international speaker, consultant, and trainer focused on unleashing the change agent potential in individuals and organizations. Her book, Everyone is a Change Agent, is available at retailers worldwide. So, April, here you go.
Great.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that great intro. Really excited to be here. It is early morning where I'm at on the west coast of the US, but I'm excited to be here with all of you and share this presentation. So let me go and get the slides going here and we will be all set. All right. There we go. Really excited to be here with you today. I believe you gave the introduction with all of this. So thanks so much for having me at the Digital Revolution Conference. And what I wanted to talk about today is a concept I call the diamond layer. And specifically, I want to focus on mid-level leaders in organizations. Because I'd argue that most implementations of change today, not just Agile, but I am going to talk about Agile, ignore these core and key resources in our organizations. We have a lot of books and conversations around what should executives do, and we have a lot of conversations and conferences around the development practices or the behaviors at the team level, but it's often that middle that gets missed. So when we start any change, but especially I've seen in the past several years, Agile implementation spreading out into every type of organization, not just software organizations. We see that we have broad aspirations for our organizations. We believe that we can accomplish new heights together if only we'll use these new methods. But what we often find as we get into the meat, the center of the change, is the harsh realities of the way we've always made change happen in the past come out. And we see scenes like this, where a leader is saying, you must make this change or else. And it's a challenge in an environment like this. If we were in an auditorium, I'd ask you all to raise your hands if you'd ever experienced this type of change effort. But I know whether you're in your home office or sitting at your kitchen table, that you're likely raising your hand because this is the reality for most organizations as they try to create change. And I'll admit, in this picture, this illustration, that's me. When I tried to create change early in my career, I was forcing others to do what I thought was best. For the organization, the change was right, but the way I went about it created problems. And specifically, I think we create problems in change because of the way, not that how our organization is structured, but actually in how we deal with its structure with our approach to change. And so I want to focus today on this middle layer, this key layer that has a ton of insights, a ton of capabilities, and is often missed as we work through changes in our organizations. And I call this middle layer the diamond layer. And let's talk about why. So in today's talk, I wanted to cover three things. The first thing I'm going to do is explain why are these middle level leaders called the diamond layer? Why do I make the case that that's a best name for them to honor their role in change? The second is, what are the challenges they face? Now, there's a multitude of challenges, but for the sake of focusing our conversation today, I'm just going to focus on three. And the third is, how can they make a big difference today? You see, I find most folks, as I travel around the world and talk to people in the midst of changes, I find so many folks saying, just give me a little hint. How can I make a better difference tomorrow or today? And so I'm going to give a few tips there, and hopefully we'll have a rich conversation afterwards about your change challenges. and what you might do. So first, why are they called the diamond layer? Well, this middle layer in organizations often faces a range of pressures upon them. And let's detail them one by one. The first level of pressure is executive pressure. Executive pressure comes to this middle layer, this diamond layer, this way. We've decided to take the entire organization agile. Please proceed to get your teams on board. I'm sure if I asked you who's had that order given to them, many of you would raise your hands. Maybe many of you would say, I'm the actual one that gave that order. And what I find is this in this executive pressure upon that middle layer, that diamond layer, is a lot of assumptions by the senior executives that everything that's needed to carry out that order is somehow within that leader's sphere of control. And many of you can probably tell a story when we get to the conversation section about a time where you were given an executive order without the capability to carry it out. A simple example is I've seen organizations attempt to move into continuous integration and continuous delivery without an investment in the tool infrastructure necessary to accomplish that. That is one way this executive pressure is felt upon that diamond layer. But it's not the only pressure they face. Pleasing the boss is not the only pressure they face. There's also employee pressure. And I'd argue it's very keen and very huge in Agile implementations. Why? Because employees in Agile are promised a bit of a utopia. Control over their work, insights into value, delivery of it, in order to support them in their mission to deliver products to customers. But what we see in many implementations is often a lesser version of that being allowed. Well, we'll look for you to do Scrum, but maybe we won't allow you to self-organize. Or we'll encourage certain behaviors that are part of the Agile portfolio, but prohibit others. And when employees see these disconnects between what they were promised and what their boss allows them to do, they apply this pressure then back up to their manager and say, why won't you let me? Why can't you make them, the senior leaders, understand what I need? Why aren't you doing a better job? Some of you who've been in this situation are probably sadly chuckling to yourself of the time where good people who worked for you came to you with these expectations that you wanted to deliver on and couldn't. But this isn't the only set of pressures. If it was just these, maybe we could deal with it, but it keeps building. There's also contractor pressure. We know many Agile implementations specifically, but not exclusively. Often it's even across the range of changes in large organizations, have contractors which are brought in to support the change. And often, unfortunately, the task these contractors have is to get the job done at all costs, which means they, who are also doing that picture with the whip of pushing and ordering, become another force and pressure upon this diamond layer. Why won't you get your people on board? Why can't you get them to understand? Why won't you implement this right away? It's on my spreadsheet. It says by Tuesday. Why aren't you done? So here we have a situation where the executive pressure and the employee pressure was tough enough. Now we've got somebody from the outside that our bosses are paying to also yell at us. But that's not where it ends. There's also consultant pressure, contractor pressure. Contractor pressure is the staff that maybe we hire to support, and consultant pressure is the senior level coming down at us. So now we've got vendors, suppliers who are frustrated with us in the middle. We've got consultants who are ordering us to do it or else. And these two groups add in to the pressure, right? Contractor pressure, am I getting the best use out of these extra resources? Consultant pressure, am I complying with these overall big plans for a big Agile rollout? And even if it was just these pressures, maybe the middle level would be able to make it through. But what we find is that these aren't the only pressures. Pull out to their lives, to the situations they're facing, this diamond layer. And what you find is they've got family pressures. By the time you get to the mid-levels, you're likely in mid-career, early mid-career, maybe late mid-career, at the exact time when most people face the mounting pressures of family commitments. Mortgages are big. Children are getting older. Where will they go to college? How will I afford the expenses of what comes next? Did I invest enough when I was young in my career? All of these decisions are coming in and creating pressure. Pressure to do a good job. Pressure not to lose this job by not doing the best job. And then you get family pressure from the other side. Retirement is looming. Maybe parents are getting older and there's struggles with providing for them and supporting them as well. And so it can feel like the whole world expects something you don't know if you can deliver. And in that pressure, sadly, I've seen great people, fantastic professionals, competent in their profession, shrink, and some of them end up collapsing under the weight of it. But I'd argue there's a different way to look at this pressure, both from the inside, if you're one of these people facing this conflict, and also from the outside, if you're one of the people in the organization, whether you're family or in the organization, the executives, the employees, the contractors, the consultants, where you can honor the situation these mid-level leaders face. And that's why I give them the honoring name of the diamond layer. Because pressure can destroy or pressure can build brilliance. And I'm eager to be here today to help those in that diamond layer understand what they're facing and what they can do to shine. So let's talk now about what are some specific challenges with an implementation and with change in general that this diamond layer faces. I want to talk about 3 today. And honestly, I could talk about a laundry list, multitudes of challenges, but I limited myself to 3 so we could have a rich conversation. Invisibility, a power paradox, and competing operating systems. So let's discuss each in turn. The first is invisibility. You see, many implementations, specifically of Agile, also in others, offer promises of more results for less investment, more autonomy and control, more predictability of delivery. But who do they offer more to? Well, if you were to look through a list of the promises that these implementations make, often you'd find that the promises speak to what executives care about and speak to what teams care about. You see, in many implementations, especially in Agile, unfortunately, the middle is missing. They're actually offered, unfortunately, less control over what work your team does. Oh no, that's the product owner's job now. Less control over delivery timing. Maybe that's turned over to the train in safe. Less control, less value, less notoriety, less expectation that they're even present. In some implementations, there's actually an argument that let's just eliminate the middle level. We don't need them. Now, how does that hurt and impact somebody who spent their life working hard to get into a position where they had at least a little bit of influence so they could help the teams that they used to be on succeed? I have met countless mid-level leaders around the world who are hungry, striving to make a difference. But when you look at the implementation, they're invisible. We'll talk about how we can resolve this, but this is a real challenge that people are facing. And if you've experienced this, I'd love to hear your story when we get to the Q&A. Now, the next thing we face for the diamond layer is what I call the power paradox. You see, most of us, regardless of our level in an organization, assume others are more powerful than they are. You could do that if only you would try. Whether it's executives that we perceive are withholding funding that's actually available from us when we're going through an implementation, whether it's expecting engineers to deliver more code, more insights, more quality than they are, whether it's that mid-level that we're focusing on now, who's often put in a bind with the assumption that executives have that if you'll just tell your team better, if you'll just give a better order, they'll do it. So clearly, if your team isn't on board, isn't producing, isn't aligning to what we're working on, it must be you as a bad leader because you have all this power over your team. But what do we know? We know that power is limited. And yet, on the flip side of the power paradox, what we find often is mid-level leaders, executives, and team members assuming they're much less powerful than they actually are. And I love to use this joke to highlight this confusion of power in organizations. And it goes something like this. What's the difference between a Parisian street mime in his or her invisible box and somebody in a large implementation? The punchline is the street mime knows they're in an invisible box. You see, I find people who constantly are confused about how much power they have, how much reach they have, versus how little they perceive they have. And they're confused about the grand power someone else has, when really that person's power might be limited. So if we can honor this power paradox and break it, we can actually enable a lot more understanding in organizations. That what power might I not be using over my situation that I can leverage? And how can I respect the fact that maybe someone else isn't really able to accomplish as much as I thought? And how can I check that understanding with them to maybe pull them out of their invisible box, or with me to appreciate the honest limits they face? And now for the third challenge. Oh, but first, forgot my own slides. What you'll find in the power paradox is often that the senior executives, we could probably label them optimists, right? These are folks who are constantly saying, oh, it's fine. I'm sure you can do it. I have confidence in you. Nothing changes in what you're provided, what you have, what they're offering, but they're constantly giving the message, it'll be fine. Just keep going. It's great. We'll get there. And then you get from the bottom, often the idealists. And if you think about Agile implementations and you've been in these roles, you've probably heard the developer who comes to you and says, the manifesto says, or this practice says, and it says I get, and you're never going to be able to provide all of those functionalities, all of those capabilities. And so you're struggling between optimists who are telling you, you can do it, I have confidence in you, even if it's, I want you to get to the moon, but all you have is an old Volkswagen. And the idealists from below who are saying, come on, why can't we have 10 things, even if you only have a budget for 3? I know we can do it. And so I find that the diamond layer actually are the realists often, and should be honored in their realism so that you can understand what are the real challenges and trade-offs they're facing. Because if everyone in the organization suffers from this power paradox, I'd argue that the people who have the clearest sense of truthfully what power they have and what power they don't are in this diamond layer, are realists. And the third challenge that the diamond layer faces that I want to talk to you about today is competing operating systems. Specifically, Agile and many other changes put in a big pile of new rules that organizations need to follow. We're going to prioritize work this way. We're going to induct work this way. We're going to complete work this way. We're going to measure work this new way. But many of you, I'm sure, can tell me a story of a time where the new rule clashed right up against an old rule. And the old rule was much more powerful than the new rule. Simple examples include, moving into self-organizing teams, except the HR processes require an elaborate selection and assignment process to ensure something that those systems were designed to ensure. And so over here we have agility and frequent movement of people into new opportunities. And over here we have a rigid system that classifies people and directs them into certain ways and locks them into different paths. And you can't really have that flexibility and rigidity all at once. And often the task of translating and troubleshooting, right? I'm an engineer. I used to do system troubleshooting for the US Navy on aircraft carriers and submarines. And my job was to understand what in the system isn't aligning, troubleshoot it and get it aligned. And these mid-level leaders, this diamond layer, is often the place where those two systems clash. And they hear things like, just figure it out, from senior executives. Now I'm in the middle, I'm in the diamond layer, I can't change either rule, they're being given to me. And my boss, rather than helping me, says, just figure it out. Quite a challenge. Or from below, the teams say, just make it stop. They'll say, I can't support this old ticketing system, this old workflow system while also doing Agile. And they'll beg you as the mid-level leader, the diamond level leader, to make it stop. Whether to make the old system stop or to make the new system stop. And often in the diamond layer, you're in that bind because you're suffering from the fact that you think you can only do so much and you can't make it work and no one is listening. And I'm confident some of you have stories about that exact thing happening. So I'll admit, this is the part of the talk which is sort of sad and frustrating. You're like, oh, that was me. I went through that. I don't like that memory. But we can come out the other side and come up with scenarios and solutions to help you in that diamond layer. Or if you're not in that diamond layer, help your fellow employees who are to thrive. So these were the challenges we talked about. But now I want to talk and pivot to positivity, how we can make a big difference today. So I'm going to talk about 3 things here. The first, drive change. Second, stake a claim. And the third, build a policy buffer. And it's likely I'm going to be introducing some new concepts to you. I'm really excited to do that because hopefully it expands your toolkit of options you can use, whether from the diamond layer or in support of the diamond layer to help accelerate your implementations. So the first one, drive change. I choose these words very carefully because I believe in this motive force to push us towards our goals. And yet what we often see is not people driving change. I'd argue we see people driving people. And if you look at most implementations out there, they start with an aspiration for the organization. They start with an aspiration, that mountain peak we're all hoping to climb. But if you look at the actual implementation plan, it's a lot about who must do what or else. And so you'll see that our focus is often not on the change, not on the systems in the organization, not on the methods or the mindsets which are getting in the way of delivering greater value. The force is often applied to the people. And like I said, many years ago, I did this to people. I had a change I was trying to create of improving the flow of work products through a group. And instead of focusing on what were the limitations in the systems and partnering with the diamond layer, I used the greatest weapon in all organizations, their email calendar, their Outlook calendar, to compel them to come to my meetings, to compel them to comply with my spreadsheet, to compel them to meet my timeline to get those goals for the organization. I didn't listen to their concerns. I didn't address their conflicts. I didn't honor their value. I expected them to do work for me to accomplish my goals or else. And the funny part of this story is when I was doing this, I was a very young engineer with very little credibility. And I'm almost grateful I was, because it taught me early in my career not to treat people that way. Because you see, the first time I sent them the mandatory meeting, they came because they were curious. The second meeting, they came to tell me all the ways I was wrong. And the third meeting, they didn't show up. Of course, I went to their bosses and complained, right? Get the executive pressure to push on them. But I'd lost the way. And as I looked for a different way to create change, I realized we needed to name a different way so we could choose it. And I call that driving change. And driving change looks like this, where you're choosing a change for yourself and clearing the obstacles for others to choose it too. So whether you are part of the diamond layer or outside the diamond layer and eager to help them and the organizations, the key in any change, but certainly in an agile one, where we're talking about the manifesto, which says by doing it and helping others do it, we need to commit to driving change, not people. And when we drive change, we're looking at what can I do with what I have, where I am, to deliver this value. We don't have to pick a different mountain, a different challenge for our org. What we can do is choose a different way up that mountain. One that honors the diamond layer, one that honors everyone by saying, I'm willing to do this. Will you join me? Come with me. Because so many of us, whether it was a mid-level leader, diamond layer leader, an executive, if they said, I'm choosing to do this, here's what I'm working on, would you want to join me? In most organizations, you'll find people ready to move into a better future. Now, the next opportunity we have in the diamond layer, specifically for the diamond layer, is to stake a claim on your value in the org and what you can deliver that no one else can do. So these 4 categories of what I call settlers are really important to talk about, because you see the diamond layer is that landowner, in effect, in an organization, the person who has been entrusted as the caretaker of this team, this area of the organizational value, and has been working to cultivate, at whatever capability that leader has, the best possible delivery of that value for the organization. So oftentimes I see in implementations, the diamond layer, when a new change comes in, shrinking back to avoid it, instead of leaning in to the change and saying, I'm really excited you're here. I'm really grateful you're going to help us, or you're going to partner with us to get greater value out of this company. I believe in our purpose, or I wouldn't be working here. And here's what I can contribute. Whether it's explaining the past, to explain why do you have the old operating system, helping figure out, well, if this is really vital to how we work, how can we maintain the vital pieces while we make the change? Typically, only that diamond layer knows that history, because they've been there, they know why it was the way it was, and they can help build the future. Or you're the current settler, and you can say, look, I'm doing this work today with these teams. As we look at how to build that future, let me help you make sure you preserve what value there is so you can get the greatest value as we change. And they're often best to say what the conditions are like right now. Can we take this team to fully self-organizing? Well, that diamond layer leader is going to know who struggles with that much autonomy and who needs to be developed into it. You're not going to find that on a spreadsheet. You're not going to find that in one PI planning session. Only that diamond layer leader really knows. They also probably know what's missing in the system because they've been living without it for years. And this is where examples like CI and CD come in, because often when we talk about, well, we want to push to production more often, a diamond layer leader would say, fantastic. I don't have a tool set to do that. I am missing the partner which gives me those tools, and I cannot make up for those tools with hard work and encouragement. So the diamond layer is really best to help an organization understand if we're moving to Agile, if we're moving to faster value delivery, what are the gaps in our organizational structure that we can no longer live with? And I'd also argue that the diamond layer leaders have a good instinct on who benefits most from what this team does, those downstream settlers who are looking for you to make this difference and make this value, and they can best help those who are driving an implementation or executives or even teams understand why does it matter that we do this instead of that? Why do our customers care about this feature and this way we work? And so if you're in the diamond layer, you could speak for those customers you've been serving for years. You can bring their voice or them specifically into the room to work together with you. One of the Agile goals is to get closer to the customer, but I find that without this instinct and support from the diamond layer, often it goes undone. And so you have a huge opportunity to talk to the past, to explain the current state and say, now how can we? To point out the gaps in the organization and to honor the customers that you've served for so long. Please, diamond layer members, stake a claim to what you know and leverage it for the sake of an implementation. You, more so, I'd argue, than executives and more so than teams who have a limited understanding of the bigger picture, you have the map, diamond layer, and you can make that bold difference. And as you work to make that bold difference, the other thing that you can do better than everyone else in the organization is build what I call policy buffers. Policy buffer is a type of change buffer. And change buffers work much like project buffers do, in that project buffers protect usually the due date, which is the project, with time. Well, change buffers are also a protection of what we care about, which is the change. And a policy buffer specifically is the rules around which we operate, which can keep the waves of the status quo away from a team. This specifically addresses those dual operating system conflicts. Here's an example. We want to have self-organizing teams where developers are able to switch between projects, and reform new teams. But the HR rules prohibit that sort of freedom of movement. A diamond layer leader could partner with HR and the larger Agile implementation teams and say, I believe in the movement of these people, but what I'd like to do is actually write a rule which says for these 3 teams, 5 teams, 10 teams that work for me, we don't have to comply with this HR rule. Maybe it's as a test, maybe it's as a new normal. The rest of the organization, finance, HR, corporate services, they can conform to that rule. But for us to be able to get the value out of our agility, we need a different policy over here. So you see, you don't have to change the entire organization's policy. You just have to carve out allowances for your teams and maybe expand that out as your implementation grows. This is a huge capability that I rarely see diamond level leaders taking. So I'm excited to share it with you today because it's a hidden power you have from the diamond layer. And I encourage you to build policy buffers now for your implementations. So today we've talked about the diamond layer. why I call them that, what are some challenges that they face, and talked about how they can make a big difference today. So I hope that this speaks to the fact that as we're structured the way we're structured, we have an opportunity to say we all matter in driving an implementation and honor the special role these mid-level leaders play, and how if we can help transfer that pressure from a crushing force to building a brilliance, to allowing, if you're in that layer, to let your brilliance come out in honor and service to the change. And if you're outside that layer, to honor the challenges they face and encourage them to shine bright in service to the change. Because our reality does not have to be driving people. We, each of us, every one of us, has the opportunity to drive change. So we can go after these sunny heights we're seeking in our organizations. And we can achieve our bold and important aspirations together. For those of you who want to learn more about the change agent essentials, like driving change and building change buffers, I encourage you to check out my book, Everyone's a Change Agent. And I'm also working on a new book, so that should be coming soon, hopefully this fall. Really honored to be with you today. I hope you'll stay in touch, stay connected. I always say yes to these conferences, especially the ones in Poland. I'm only sad I didn't get to come and visit you all in person, but I'm honored to be with you from the West Coast of the US this morning, and honored to take your questions.
April, thank you very much. I'm really impressed by the quality of the connection we have, really. It's 9 hours difference in time and, thousands of miles away. But we can hear and see each other perfectly, so it's great. And of course, your presentation was very, very, very interesting. And I got 2 questions, because unfortunately we are running out of time slowly. So those 2 questions would be: is it possible middle layer doesn't support the change because its own tribal wars?
Yeah, oftentimes I see that. And sadly, it's built up because the executives think if they make it more of a competition, folks will somehow rise to the challenge. So I would love for folks to share this presentation with executives who are doing that and supporting those infightings, because they're working against their efforts by not trying to make space for all of these mid-level leaders to thrive. That's that invisibility. They're almost trying to compress them and pull them out of the system. So they're going to fight it, right? I try and stomp on you, you're going to fight back. So don't stomp on people. It's sort of simple.
Okay, so there's another question, probably referring to what you just said. What are the reactions of senior superiors to you when they hear about the diamond layer concept?
So far, it's been really great. Again, they're trapped in a power paradox too. And they're trapped in driving people. So I'm trying to speak to every layer in the organization about these issues, because executives think if they just demand more of the diamond layer, they'll get more done. And they're actually really shocked, but open to the fact that there's a better way.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Yeah.
April K. Mills from the state of Washington, far away from Poland, very far away. I hope it will be another opportunity for you to visit Poland. And
Yeah.
so have a nice day. Now you can have coffee
Yeah.
or breakfast or whatever because it's
Yeah.
half
My
past
Poland
six.
mug.
All right.
Yep.